you ever spent months, like literally months, just researching a new car?
Oh, absolutely.
You know the feeling where you are completely obsessed. You're reading every review on the internet, watching every single test drive video on YouTube.
Building the spreadsheets?
Yes,
Yeah.
building these endless color-coded spreadsheets comparing the trim levels, the gas mileage, depreciation rates, and the anticipation is just palpable.
Right.
Or maybe you've thrown yourself completely into a brand new hobby, like buying all the top-tier gear, joining all the niche forums, and dreaming about mastering it.
Yeah, going completely down the rabbit hole.
Exactly. But then the very second you actually sign the lease on that car or you achieve like the first major goal in that new hobby, the magic just evaporates.
It's just gone.
Right? You feel instantly, inexplicably bored. So today, we are exploring why that happens.
It's such a common cycle.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this intense, sometimes exhausting phenomenon known as the thrill of the chase. Specifically, we're looking at this through the lens of dopamine and the ADHD brain.
Which is a fascinating angle.
Yeah. We are going to figure out if these intense, fleeting obsessions are, a curse, or if they're actually a hidden superpower once you understand the mechanics behind them.
And to get to the bottom of it, we are pulling from some really deep neurobiology and firsthand psychology today.
We have some great sources.
We do. We'll be looking at clinical and practical insights from Alice Gendron's The Mini ADHD Coach. We're also referencing the neurochemical breakdowns in T.J. Power's book, The Dose Effect.
Love that one.
Yeah, it's great. And we're examining highly personal accounts of people living with this exact cycle.
Yeah.
Because we aren't just going to look at the surface level behavior like suddenly needing to become an expert in 18th century pottery.
Out of nowhere.
Exactly. We are going to uncover the actual physiological mechanisms happening in the brain during these obsessions, and more importantly, why that neurobiology dictates how you manage your career, your passions, and your romantic relationships.
Because the examples we have of these side quests are just wild.
Yeah.
But, to make sense of why someone would drop a hobby they just spent thousands of dollars on, we really have to start at the biological level.
We do.
Like, why does the brain demand this frantic chase in the first place?
Well, it all comes down to how your brain processes reward, and specifically through dopamine.
The famous dopamine.
Right. A really helpful way to visualize dopamine is to think of it as your brain's VIP party planner.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, so this party planner operates at a velvet rope outside a very exclusive club in your brain, which is called the striatum.
The striatum, got it.
Right, and the striatum is this critical cluster of neurons that's responsible for processing rewards, motivation, and motor function.
Okay, so it's a big deal.
Huge deal. Now, for someone with a neurotypical brain, this party planner is pretty reliable and well-regulated.
They show up on time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you complete a necessary task, even like a really mundane one, like doing your taxes or just folding laundry, the party planner unclips the velvet rope and lets a steady stream of dopamine into the striatum.
Okay, so you get the reward.
Right. That dopamine signals pleasure and accomplishment. It reinforces your behavior. It basically tells your nervous system, hey, that was beneficial. We should keep doing things like that.
Yeah, so in the ADHD brain, I'm guessing that party planner isn't managing the velvet rope quite as effectively.
No, it is a fundamentally different operation. In the ADHD brain, the VIP party planner is basically dealing with a structural crisis.
A structural crisis?
Yeah. It isn't just that the planner is distracted, it's that the club itself is leaky.
Oh, wow.
Biologically, people with ADHD often have a higher concentration of dopamine transporters.
Transporters, okay.
Yeah, and you can think of these transporters like overzealous bouncers. They're sweeping dopamine out of the synapse, the space between neurons, far too quickly.
Before you can even enjoy it.
Exactly, before it can even be properly utilized. So the result is a chronic physiological dopamine deficit in the striatum.
Okay, let's unpack this because, wait, doesn't everyone procrastinate on boring tasks? How is this actually different? Because when I hear about people putting off boring stuff, my initial reaction is usually, well, nobody actively wants to fill out expense reports, right? We all procrastinate.
That right there is the exact friction point where ADHD is most frequently misunderstood.
Really?
Yes, because the neurobiology creates a massive distinction. For a neurotypical person, an importance-based task like an expense report that, keeps you from getting fired.
Yeah, pretty important.
Right, that generates enough baseline dopamine to initiate the action. You might not enjoy it, but the structural bridge of neurotransmitters is there to get you to start. But for the ADHD brain, because of those overactive transporters clearing out the dopamine so fast, that bridge simply does not exist.
Wow.
Yeah, there is a literal physiological barrier to entry, and that leads to what clinicians call ADHD freeze or task paralysis.
So they aren't just stubbornly putting it off.
No.
The engine literally has no spark plugs.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, that brings in Dr. William Dodson's concept of the interest-based nervous system, right?
Sure.
Because if importance isn't enough to trigger the dopamine release, the brain requires entirely different criteria to actually function.
Precisely. Dodson's theory outlines that the ADHD brain just doesn't respond to everyday stimulation.
It's immune to it.
Basically. To force that VIP party planner to open the rope and flood the striatum with enough dopamine to overcome that deficit, a task has to meet very specific conditions.
Like what?
It has to be personally interesting, highly challenging, physically novel, or extremely urgent.
Okay, so it requires literal fireworks to get into the club.
Pretty much.
And looking at T.J. Power's research in the dose effect, he differentiates between the types of dopamine we actually pursue, right? He talks about slow-release dopamine versus short bursts.
Yes, very important distinction.
Because slow release comes from, sustainable low-stakes activities.
Yeah.
Reading a novel, gardening, working steadily on a long-term project.
Yeah, healthy stuff.
Right. It keeps your mood balanced over time.
Yeah.
But if your brain is constantly starved for dopamine because of those overactive transporters, you aren't going to have the patience to plant a garden and wait 3 months for a tomato.
No, absolutely not. You are going to look for the highest, fastest concentration of reward possible.
Makes sense.
The brain seeks out short, intense bursts to basically overcompensate for that baseline deficit.
So what does that look like?
Well, that could manifest as binging sugary foods, endless scrolling on a, gamified social media app,
Oh, yeah.
or going down a massive, all-consuming rabbit hole researching something entirely new because it gives you a massive neurological spike.
Right.
The striatum is finally flooded.
Finally getting into the club.
Right. But short bursts, inherently, they wear off rapidly.
They don't last.
Once the novelty fades, the transporters sweep the dopamine away, it crash hard, and that physiological hunger just starts all over again.
Which completely explains the active hunt for a spark. I mean, if your nervous system requires intense novelty just to reach a functional baseline, it is going to go out and manufacture that novelty.
Exactly. It has to.
And that mechanism is the birthplace of the bizarre, incredible world of ADHD side quests.
Oh, the side quests.
We see this play out in everyday life in such fascinating ways. Like, there is one account from our sources of a person getting passionately lit up by researching the best place to buy solar panels.
Of all things, solar panel.
Right. And they didn't just, casually look up quotes. They became an absolute solar panel aficionado overnight,
Wow.
absorbing every technical specification available.
And, for however long that buzz lasts, the person feels a profound, deeply engaging sense of purpose.
Yeah, they're in the zone.
Right. The actual mechanics of the research are generating those short bursts of dopamine.
But then there is the 6-month car itch, which perfectly illustrates the crash you mentioned earlier.
Oh, the car itch. Yeah.
This individual spent 6 to 7 months researching a new car. They loved the intricate process, comparing models, hunting for the best deal. Once they actually secured the car on a 4-year lease, a hard reality set in.
They get bored.
Invariably, within 6 to 12 months, they are completely over it.
Yeah.
Because the physical car itself was never the actual prize.
Yeah.
The thrill of the chase was the prize. And once the car is sitting in the driveway, the mystery is gone, and the dopamine well just dries up immediately.
Yeah, the acquisition of the object marks the definitive end of the dopamine hit. But we should also really address the psychological toll of that moment.
Oh, definitely.
Because when the excitement evaporates, it rarely leaves the person feeling neutral. No, it usually leaves them feeling immense guilt.
Oh.
They look at this expensive car lease or, the garage full of unused gear for a hobby they dropped, and they feel a deep sense of shame for wasting time and resources.
That shame is such a heavy undercurrent. You achieve the goal, and your reward is feeling like a failure because you just can't maintain the passion.
Exactly.
And that cycle is incredibly stark in the snooker obsession story we looked at.
Oh, that one is amazing.
The escalation here is unbelievable. So the author describes casually playing snooker on a PlayStation during the COVID lockdowns.
Right. A completely
No.
normal way to pass the time.
Super normal.
Right.
But the interest-based nervous system grabs onto the novelty. So PlayStation Snooker snowballs into joining real-life amateur leagues.
Naturally.
But the leagues aren't enough stimulation, so they start a podcast about snooker.
Of course they do.
Then they build a dedicated website, they cultivate a community, and they start running their own independent leagues.
What's fascinating here is just the sheer scale of it. It is a staggering amount of output, creativity, and dedication compressed into a very short window of time.
And it peaks. It peaks with them actually interviewing the 2010 world champion, Neil Robertson, on their podcast.
Which is incredible.
Right. For most people, networking your way from playing a video game to interviewing a world champion, that's the foundation of a lifelong career in sports media.
Absolutely.
But less than 2 years later, the podcast, the website, the leagues, all entirely abandoned.
Because the absolute peak had been reached.
Look off the rabbit?
Exactly. The novelty was fully consumed. And this really highlights the severe dual nature of hyperfocus.
How so?
Well, on one hand, the velocity of an interest-based nervous system is basically a force of nature. It allows an individual to achieve things that seem impossible to others.
Sound like getting Neil Robertson on a podcast.
Right, but the psychological whiplash of achieving the impossible and then feeling nothing but an empty urge to just walk away, that is brutal.
There is an analogy from the literature that vividly captures this exact feeling.
The dog analogy.
Yes. The thrill of the chase for an ADHD brain is like a dog in a field full of rabbits.
Yeah.
The dog is frantic, joyous, and just totally engaged in the hunt. It wants to chase every single rabbit it sees.
Right.
But if the dog actually catches a rabbit, the game is instantly over. The joy was in the running. So the dog drops the catch, leaves it behind, and immediately takes off after a new target.
It's such a brilliant visualization. And, the tragedy of being the dog in the field is that you are never actually fed.
Oh, wow. That's a great point.
You are in a constant state of expenditure. Hyperfocus looks like a superpower when you're building a podcast, but internally, it is an exhausting compulsion where true satisfaction always remains just out of reach. There's always another rabbit.
And that exhaustion, it might be manageable when we were talking about snooker leagues or discovering old indie bands, but applying that same novelty-seeking logic to the high-stakes areas of your life, like your livelihood, that creates a serious survival problem.
Absolutely.
Like, how does this dopamine-seeking behavior translate into the workplace?
Well, data and firsthand accounts show that people with ADHD frequently gravitate toward jobs that are high in stimulation, heavy on crisis management, and very low in routine.
So like ER nurses.
ER nurses, emergency responders, fast-paced sales.
Okay.
The issue arises when they find themselves in a typical, corporate environment. One account details a person quitting a perfectly stable, well-paying job simply because it was mind-numbingly dull.
Just bored.
But the routine wasn't just boring. Because of that dopamine deficit, sitting at that desk for 8 hours was physically and mentally painful.
So they jump ship. They switch industries entirely to find something dynamic.
They find a new rabbit to chase. And initially, it's a massive relief. The learning curve of a new job provides endless novelty.
Right.
But just like the 6-month car itch, the career honeymoon phase has an expiration date.
Always does.
The moment they master the new role, the tasks become mundane chores. The transporters sweep the dopamine away, the ADHD freeze sets in, and they are right back at square one, updating their resume just to feel engaged with life again.
And if changing jobs every 2 years is financially stressful, applying this cycle to love and relationships is just emotionally devastating.
It really is.
Because the romantic thrill of the chase is perhaps the most potent source of dopamine available to human beings.
Oh, without a doubt.
When you meet someone new, deciphering the mystery of who they are, overanalyzing the text messages, the anticipation of those first few dates, it provides a massive neurological surge.
It is the ultimate novelty. But human neurobiology is designed to transition from the intense novelty of a new mate to the stable familiarity of long-term attachment.
Right.
In a neurotypical relationship, that transition to familiarity is actually comforting. It provides a reliable stream of that slow-release dopamine we talked about earlier.
But for an interest-based nervous system, slow-release dopamine just doesn't register strongly enough to clear the deficit.
Exactly.
So the fading of the newness doesn't feel comforting at all. It feels like the relationship is dying. And the accounts of this are heartbreaking. People describe watching new potential relationships morph from intense electric romances into polite acquaintances simply because the chase was over.
Yeah.
They literally lose the romantic feelings the moment the person becomes a known quantity.
And it creates a very volatile roller coaster for both people involved.
So what does this all mean? Like, if the brain is fundamentally wired with this leaky club, constantly abandoning the caught rabbit, is an individual with an doomed. Are they destined to hop from job to job and partner to partner, leaving a trail of dizzy, exhausted loved ones behind them?
Well, first, we really have to validate the pain of that cycle.
Yeah.
It is profoundly draining for the individual who feels like they are just incapable of settling down and being content.
Yeah.
And it is deeply painful for their partners.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They desperately try to keep up with the shifting obsessions, they internalize the boredom, and they constantly wonder, why am I not enough?
It sounds incredibly isolating.
Yeah.
You're surrounded by people, but constantly feeling understimulated.
It is very isolating. However, this is where understanding the actual mechanics of the striatum and the dopamine transporters changes everything.
How so?
Because knowing the biological reality isn't about throwing your hands up and saying, oh, well, my brain is broken, I can't help my behavior. It is about recognizing the exact parameters of the machine you are driving so you can intentionally hack the system.
Because we definitely need actionable strategies for navigating a neurotypical world. I mean, how do we pay the mortgage and maintain long-term relationships without losing our minds to boredom?
Okay, the foundational strategy is learning to artificially pair dopamine sources with dopamine-depleted tasks.
Okay, pairing them.
Right. If you know you experience task paralysis with household chores, you cannot rely on willpower.
Never works.
Never. You have to manufacture the spark.
So you essentially trick the VIP party planner into opening the velvet rope by bringing a high-profile guest.
Yes.
So if my current hyperfixation is ancient Roman history, I only allow myself to listen to my favorite Roman history podcast while I'm doing the dishes or folding laundry.
Precisely. You are attaching a reliable short-burst dopamine source to a mundane task, creating enough neurochemical momentum to actually get through it.
That's smart.
And the same applies to larger obligations. If social interaction lights up your brain, don't force yourself through a solitary, agonizing gym session.
Right.
Turn it into a structured hangout with a friend. Or, if you have a massive work report, break it down into micro-tasks that offer immediate, tangible rewards upon completion. The ADHD brain struggles immensely with delayed gratification, so you have to pull the gratification into the present moment.
But I mean, life hacks only get you so far if you are still carrying the emotional baggage of the past, right?
Yeah.
The shame we discussed earlier, the guilt of dropping the hobbies or hurting partners. How does that factor into the physical chemistry?
It's huge. Emotional blockages actively suppress dopamine function. Yes, years of struggling with tasks, combined with a high sensitivity to rejection or, comorbid conditions like depression, they create a state where negative emotions literally override the reward center.
Wow.
So you might find a new rabbit to chase, but the deep-seated shame of knowing you will probably drop it in a month ruins the dopamine spike before it even happens.
So the guilt essentially acts as another bouncer at the club, keeping the reward out.
Exactly. And this is why addressing emotional hurdles is non-negotiable. You cannot hack a system that is buried in shame.
Makes sense.
This requires external support. Working with a therapist who specializes in ADHD, relying on an understanding support network, and frequently consulting a medical professional about stimulant medication.
Right, the medication piece.
Because stimulants physically inhibit those overactive dopamine transporters, they allow the dopamine to actually stay in the synapse and do its job.
It gives the brain a baseline to actually utilize the behavioral hacks. And, all of these strategies seem to build toward one overarching philosophy for long-term happiness. I keep thinking about the 6-month car itch analogy.
Oh, yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The ultimate strategy isn't to stop liking cars.
Right.
The strategy is, instead of buying a brand new car every 6 months to get that dopamine hit, you take the car you already have on a completely unpredictable, totally new road trip.
That is a phenomenal conceptualization. You are finding deliberate ways to inject novelty into the old, rather than blowing up your life to seek something completely new.
Yeah. If your career is feeling stagnant and the routine is physically hurting your brain, you don't instantly quit your job and change industries.
Please don't.
Right. You advocate to take on a highly challenging, slightly terrifying new project at your current company. You change the road trip, not the vehicle.
And the exact same logic applies to long-term relationships. When the honeymoon phase inevitably fades, you don't abandon the partner to chase a new spark.
You don't jump ship.
You introduce shared novelty into the existing dynamic. You start a complex new hobby together. You travel to a foreign environment where you both have to navigate the unknown. You take a difficult class together. You generate the thrill of the chase with your partner.
It's about feeding that insatiable hunger for stimulation, but doing it constructively.
Exactly.
So just to recap the journey we've taken today, we started by looking at the leaky club in the brain and how overactive dopamine transporters create this interest-based nervous system.
The VIP planner.
Right. And we explored the double-edged sword of the chase, how it can drive you to build a snooker empire or research complex tech, but also leave you drowning in shame when the novelty inevitably wears off.
Yeah.
And finally, we uncover the mechanics of hacking that system, pairing tasks, clearing the emotional hurdles of guilt, and intentionally injecting novelty into the familiar.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really requires a fundamental shift in how you view your own drives and impulses.
It really does. So, to you, the listener, if you find yourself constantly staring at a garage full of abandoned hobbies, or scrolling through job boards when your current job is totally fine, or feeling restless when the initial electricity of a relationship transitions into quiet comfort, your brain isn't broken.
It's not.
You aren't lazy, and you aren't destined to be alone. Your nervous system is just uniquely hungry for a spark. You simply have to learn how to responsibly light the fire yourself.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a broader context to consider.
Let's hear it.
We've detailed how the ADHD brain naturally craves short-burst dopamine to overcome its deficit. Now, zoom out and look at the modern world. We live in an economy that is actively engineering billions of shiny short-burst dopamine traps every single day.
Oh, man. Endless algorithmic social media feeds, gamified dating apps, the constant ping of notifications.
Exactly. If the brightest minds in technology are designing platforms specifically to hijack the dopamine system of a perfectly regulated, neurotypical brain, how much harder does that make daily survival for someone with an interest-based nervous system?
That's a scary thought.
How much more deliberate do you have to be to avoid those engineered traps so you can save your limited dopamine for the pursuits that actually build a deeply fulfilling life?
It really reframes the battle for your attention. The next time you find yourself spending months building a spreadsheet to research a purchase or feeling the urge to drop a passion project, remember, the thrill is in the chase. Enjoy the road trip, but don't forget to appreciate the car once the keys are actually in your hand.